What's going on, everybody? Let's go ahead and move this over just a little bit. See if we can get it centered a little bit some on there. Thanks for stopping back by another episode of Jesse's Occupational Awareness Channel. As always, I'm Jesse, here to entertain, educate, enlighten, and talk about different occupations that I've been involved in. We're going to continue on with our series about TDCJ. Up to this point, quite a few of the videos leading up to here was when I had gone through the academy, I'd gone through my OJT process, I put in the shift that I wanted to be assigned to, and was fortunate to get the shift that I had wanted. I would find out from Field Training Officer Lewis that I would be assigned to administrative segregation day shift, and I couldn't have been happier. It was exactly what I wanted, or so I thought at the time. So I had found out about my shift on the Friday, getting off. At that point, I was no longer OJT, had Saturday and Sunday off, was told to report to the turnout room there in segregation, and go from that point. So went home, had my weekend off to myself. Sorry for the lighting here today. It's again raining, as it seems like it has for the last week here in Hampton, but we're going to get through, do with what we can with it. So I had the weekend to myself. I came in on I came in Monday morning. I had to be in turnout by 06:30, so as usual, I'd show up early. Usually I'd be in the parking lot around 4:20, 4:30. That was kind of pushing it. Everybody has to go through pat down and get searched through, like in the previous videos that I talked about. So the later you showed up, the longer the line was going to be. You never wanted to be late. That just bad. I don't know what happened to officers that did show up late. I was always on time. We had the saying, if you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. So keep that in mind, use it. So I get to the parking lot around 4:30, get through pat down, get through all the sally ports, walk through the main building, the main admin area, get through the walkway. Usually by that time, night shift was just finishing up feeding breakfast. I think they started around 3:30 in the morning, something of that nature. Day shift would feed lunch and dinner chows. Night shift would feed breakfast because it was just that early in the morning. So I would have just enough time to get past the walkway, and usually the supervisor that was working there would ask, could you help pat down inmates? And if you did, good on you. But it could make you late for your turnout, you could get caught up in something, and if I showed up in turnout late, and my excuse was, well, I was helping pat down offenders outside the chow hall, first thing lieutenant or sergeant would say would be, are you Gen Pop? You segregation. Roger that, got it. So you basically had to tell that supervisor no. And depending on what kind of mood the supervisor was in, would depend on what kind of response you would elicit from that supervisor. Either get threatened with a write-up, which never happened, or threatened with insubordination, or maybe just some kind of unprofessional comment, lazy ass boss, something like that. So it didn't happen all the time, but it did happen. Get past that, I showed up early enough that I would have enough time to stop in the ODR, the officer's dining room, and I could get some breakfast. Breakfast was extremely limited. You could either get some eggs, either scrambled or over medium, over hard, never runny. The grill, I don't guess they knew how to do it. I didn't even bother to ask. You get that and some coffee or some of the red or orange or purple drink that came out of the 55-gallon drums that were turned over on their sides. If they didn't have eggs, which most of the time they didn't, they would have pancakes. Make some pancakes on the griddle. You get 2, 3, 4, however many you wanted within reason. And then the syrup was, it was the most watered down syrup that you could get. The stuff that was served over in a fender chow hall was like 90% water, 10% syrup. So take the syrup bottle that you buy from, say, Walmart, Food Lion, whatever grocery store you're in, pour about a little more than 3/4 of that out, fill the rest of that up with water, shake it up, there's your syrup consistency. Wasn't a whole lot to it. Now the stuff over in I'm sorry. The stuff over in the ODR was a little bit better, but it was still thin, watery, runny, but you didn't pay for it. It was free food. There was that. You learned very early on to eat everything with a spork. There were no plastic forks, plastic knives. Everything was spork related. Supposedly it was easier to stab somebody. Yeah, that was your utensil. So I'd eat me up a little breakfast, get on down into the Seg building, which was 12 building, get through the fence, show the picket boss there your ID card. She popped the door. I say she because the shift that I worked on, that was always her position. Go through the little metal detector that they had there, get patted down by the officer that was there. Now, you'd already been patted down once. Policy and procedure, you were supposed to be patted down the same way. Did that happen? No. Did a lot of times we just kind of go on past the boss? Yeah. I remember his face. I can't remember his name. He was an older white guy. He had been there for quite a while. He'd worked his way up to that position. The main thing that he was there for, the workers that were going to come in there, county jail, trustees, TDCJ, SSI, service support individual, I think was what the I stood for. It's not inmate. They were called officially offenders there. But SSI, that's what you'd hear yell down the hallway, and they'd come do their job most of the time, if you could get them to. His function there was more to make sure they weren't bringing anything in the Seg building, and they weren't taking anything out of the Seg building. These were offenders who were the best behaved of the offenders. They lived in the dorms, so the contraband that they could cart around and carry was usually a lot more than there were in cells because they had more access to items. So he had a pretty important position. Even though he was supposed to treat us the same, usually we just went on by. Stop by the picket, say hi to the officer that was in there, shoot the shit with her for a minute. Go on down the hallway, get in turnout room. By this point, it might be around 5:50, something like that. You needed to be in there before 6. 6 to 6:30 was turnout. You go in the room, it's just the closed room, devoid of any kind of niceties, pleasantries, just as bare base as the wall here is behind me. No decorations, nothing in it. It's full of metal folding chairs, the wooden table with the legs that fold out from underneath it. It's real old school kind from like the 60s, the 70s that weigh about 50 pounds, even though it doesn't look like it. And if those set up in the front with some chairs, and that's where the supervisors would sit. I believe, if I remember correctly, my lieutenant was Lieutenant Raymond. I think he might have gotten bumped down to sergeant, back up to lieutenant. Sergeant Jones is no longer in segregation. He got moved away. He was not a very popular sergeant. We'll get into that later on. And we had a female sergeant. I don't remember her name. I do know that she was tatted from hand all the way up. Can't say so for the shirt. Never saw anything before that. and bouncing back and forth, we would have Sergeant Como. Sergeant Como was good shit. I got along with him really well. He was a real good supervisor. He processes paperwork on time. I always enjoyed working for him. Unfortunately, I didn't get to enough because he moved to a different shift pretty early on when I got there. So, Monday morning, I've gotten through everything. I'm sitting in turnout. I'm early. I'm brand new. Officers start filing in. I should be doing the right thing, standing up, introducing myself, saying hi to everyone. I didn't. Introverted personality. I'm the new guy. I'm thinking maybe the new guy is not supposed to be asserting himself all that much. I'll just stick to myself, stay quiet. A, that works. B, that can come as very standoffish. So it's a thin line to follow. If you're the guy standing up trying to make buddies with everybody and chatty Cathy, you can set the reputation of this new guy thinks he knows everything. If you're the quiet, standoffish, introverted guy like I was, you can come off as cold, somebody who's not going to fit in, antisocial. There wasn't much way to win, and you only had that one time to pick which one you were going to go with. I went with the quiet, shy type. So, a couple of officers would come in. The senior ones, they wouldn't even make eye contact with me. Wouldn't even look at me. You're not even in the room. They take their seats in the back of the room, carry on their conversation, not even pay attention much to who was in the room until the supervisor walked in, and even after lieutenant would call the room to order, they would still keep carrying on until he specifically called them out. If he didn't, they'd just keep on. Yeah. Good on you, old heads. Way to represent. So, sorry, a little bit bitter to some of them. So I'm sitting in the turnout room. Officers come filing in. Cool. The one who was working at the front, she had come into the back to, apparently she'd gotten there a little bit early and was just filling in for the time being. She'd come in. She was the one who was the most receptive to me. Come over, sat down right beside me, introduced herself. I believe her name was Miss Perkins. We shook hands. Academy, Huntsville, time frame, welcome to Seg. Is this what you wanted? Yes, it was. All right, here's the rundown of how shift's going to work. She asked what had I brought in with me. At the time, I had brought nothing. I didn't have a water bottle, nothing. I had my pen and my ID card. Gave me a brief rundown of things that I could bring in. Plastic bag that you could buy from commissary, stuff you could cart with yourself. It's good to bring a calendar with you, one of the small little pocket size kind of calendars. Check off the days. That way at the end of the month you could show how many days you work. So if you were short a day, you could prove it to human resources, which happened way more often than it should have. Come to find out, everybody carried those little calendars and checked off their days. Sometimes the supervisors were bad at roll call. You really had to take care of yourself, as I would find out very early on. And then from there, we waited for the supervisors to come in. Lieutenant Raymond, Sergeant Jones came in. Good morning, everyone. Hope your weekend was good from that point. They had been on their 4-day off shift, and I just happened to be starting on a Monday that was their actual Monday. It wasn't uncommon for you to finish OJT, get assigned to a shift, it be their last day, and then you would be off for the next 4 days thinking, wow, all right, work a day, get 4 days off, great. Didn't always work out like that. And in my case, I happened to start on their Monday, so I was able to file right in. Lieutenant Raymond asked, any new officers that we have in here, go ahead and introduce yourself, stand up. Officer Carter, CO3, graduated the academy such and such date. Glad to be here. Looking forward to working with everybody. You know, a round of applause would come out. The senior heads sitting in the back, they just sit there, do nothing. Whatever, guys. Way to be senior. And from there, Lieutenant Raymond went down anything that had gone on during the night. Were there any kind of assaults? Who had been moved in? Who had been moved out? any kind of special things to look forward to, to look for that were going on, i.e. F-Pod, the phone's still broken in the picket, D-Pod, 1 through 14, the lock mechanism, the electronic is broken, you got to use the manual lock, things like that. I'd run down all that, and then he would do the shift assignments. A Pickett, Carter, B, A Pickett, Carter, A Rover, Jones, A Rover, Perkins, B Pickett, on down and so forth. In Seg, we worked in groups of 3s. 1 in the picket, 2 on the floor. Now, A and B pods were the, quote, best behaved of Seg offenders. There could be 1 officer on the floor and 1 in the picket, if we were shorthanded, if it was more of an experienced senior officer. I've already expressed my opinion about those senior ones that worked in Seg. They were not role models at all. They were not ones to learn from. Try not to get going on it. From Charlie Pod on down to F Pod, there had to be 3 officers. It was going to be a security risk, a security concern if there weren't. So every means and every measure was done to keep those pods staffed adequately. One of the things I noticed, a lot of times there would be more call-ins from general population, and Seg officers would stand Gen Pop. I talked about that in a previous video. Gen Pop officers, not officers, Gen Pop offenders, as soon as the Seg boss walked in, which you could tell us because we had our stab vest on, we didn't take it off when we weren't to work there. As soon as we walked in, oh, here we go. Because they knew that we ran a tighter ship, we demanded better conduct, they were used to getting away with stuff. Not talking smack on my Gen Pop officers, shout out to every single one of you, we're all family. But they got away with more crap. And we didn't stand for it in segregation. So when we came in, they knew cases were writing, and shit was liable to get locked down a lot quicker than it normally would. If that didn't happen, if we didn't get pulled out and there were extra officers that were left over, they would be utility officers, also known as rovers. Now the new guys, we never got assigned rover. We were always either on the floor or in the picket, because we needed to learn what it was like to be around the inmates, what it was like working with them, and go from there. Once the assignments were done from there, sometimes we'd have 10 minutes left over. A lot of times it was sitting in turnout. Just kind of looking around the room. Just dead time that wasn't really filling any kind of purpose. And that happened way more often, in my opinion, than it should have. At that point, once it was around about 6:25 or so, get up, go to the front. Whoever was assigned to the picket, go ahead and get all your paperwork, get the handcuffs, get the keys, get the 2 bean tools, metal rod with the prongs that you that you would use to open up the slots in the doors, and everyone file out to the pods. Get to the door, bang on the door, get the picket boss's attention. A lot of times on night shift, they'd be asleep. Sorry, it is what it is. Wake that boss up, they'd pop that door, go ahead on in. Picket bosses would switch out, they'd open the door, boss would go in, get briefed. The off-going picket boss would get buzzed out. The 2 floor bosses would come on over to the front door if they weren't already there, waiting, hanging out, not doing security rounds. They'd come on over, get a brief from them if anything that had gone on. A lot of times they had nothing to say. Once 6:30 would hit, they'd all file out. Boom, counted, already cleared. Now we take over the shift. Go over to the picket. Picket boss is going to pass out our bean tools, mine and my partners. Pass out the hand restraints, the key. 1 hand restraint, 1 key. Didn't get it for both bosses. You're only supposed to move 1 inmate at a time. And then you get the board. Previous video I talked about a board was all the offenders that you were assigned to, what cells they were in, and basic information on them. And then from there, go on down about the rounds, bang on the door, wake up the offender, you want rec, you want shower, all that and so forth. Once you had gone through the entire pod, there could be a maximum of 84 inmates. Most of the time there were 84. Sometimes you get lucky, there might be 80. You might even get easy shift and there'll only be 76 of them in there. Just depended on who was assigned, who had been moved, and who were holdovers. Complete random as far as where we went from there. From that point, it was time to start moving them around. And the very first shift that I worked, I was with one of the senior officers, Miss Sorrell. I always remember, I don't know how long she had been there, a long time. She was good at her job. She knew how to run inmates. The inmates didn't necessarily respect her, but they didn't give her a whole lot of crap either. They knew that she was quick on cases and knew what she was doing. Anybody who watches this video that knows the individual I'm talking about, these are my opinions about her. So, it was a long shift working with her. She was not amused in the least bit that she was working with a trainee. She didn't want to train anybody. It was her Monday morning. She just wanted a nice quiet shift to go by. And now she's got the new guy to work with her. She didn't want anything to do with it. Made it known very silently, very early on, how upset she was to have somebody breaking in with her. Whatever, we're going to get through it. At that point, I was no longer OJT, but let's face it, what did I know about working in Seg? Nothing. I didn't know the inmates, I didn't know their names, they didn't know me, so it's game on at that point. And she knew, having a brand new officer was going to make a long day for her. And she wasn't having that in the least bit. So, we go on down around the cells. She hands me the board, hands me the hand restraints, the key. I'm supposed to do everything. So I'm banging on the cell, and 3/4 of the cells that I bang on to ask for rec or shower, I'd hear, "Who you?" I can't say all the words I'd like to on YouTube, but you can imagine how, with profanity in that, what they would say. Or they try to strike up a conversation at that point. Can I get them some kind of chow? Who's working in the picket? Hey, how long you been here, boss? Hey, where you from, man? Hey, what are you doing here? You don't belong here. Why are you working with that fat piece of trash right there? You ain't supposed to... All kinds of things other than, you want rec or shower? Yeah, man. No, man. That's all I needed to hear. So they would just make it that much difficult. Once we get done with that, going back around to where we started, now it's time to start popping slots, putting hand restraints on, moving guys around. All right. Good, cool, great. About halfway through the first tier, get a call on the radio. Miss Sorrell's got a switch out. All right. So she leaves. We were in A pod at the time. A pod could be staffed by one officer. Guess who that one officer was at that point? Me. How many days had I worked in there? Since 6:30 that morning. All right. Now I'm in here by myself, no partner, in Seg, trying to move guys around. You want to think the inmates were trying to make it difficult on me and trying to mess with me? Oh, hell yeah. There was no, hey boss, it's your first day, we're going to help you get through it. Banging on the doors all day long, hooting, hollering, yelling, calling me everything that they could. I don't know what possessed them to do that, what or why, if it was just fun for them, but by the time I had made the first rounds of pulling inmates out and putting them in the day rooms, you had a total of 6 day rooms and 2 outside pods. So you could have a total of 8 offenders out at a time. With as difficult as they would make it to get it out of their cells and get them in the day room, by the time you got done with the last one, 2 hours had already been up, and it was time to start pulling these guys out from the cells. Most of the time they would come out willingly. Other times, nope, they ain't coming to the door. Get the supervisor on the radio, get them in there, find out what's going on. A lot of times they were just being difficult to me. Come to find out, it was simply because I was new. It had nothing to do with my race. Typically, they didn't see that. They saw the gray uniform that we wore, and they just didn't like that. Move back around. I'm having trouble getting the first inmate out. Picket boss calls supervisor. Supervisor comes in. I remember Sergeant Jones. Old Jones come in, and as soon as he was a bigger guy. As soon as he come in, inmates start yelling, "Get your fat ass out of here, Jones. Hey, look out, Jones. Look out, Jones. Get the fuck over here, Jones. Hey, get on out of here." They hated that guy. I didn't know why at the time. I'm thinking it's a sergeant. I got the supervisor in here now. No, it made it worse. Jones comes over to me. "Carter, what you doing in here by yourself?" "You reassign Miss Sorrell to another pod." "Yeah, but you were supposed to have somebody else." And in my mind, I'm going, was I supposed to leave the pod unattended and go get them? What do you want me to do? You want me to keep working this pod, or what was I supposed to do? So, to say that the first day was starting to go a little bit rough is an understatement. I've lost the boss that I'm supposed to be training with, even though I wasn't OJT anymore. Let's face it, training still goes on. I lost that individual. Now I got the supervisor in here. Supposed to make it better? No. Supervisor made it worse. The inmates in there, they hated that guy. Oh my God. They would just beat, bang, and holler anytime he came into any of the pods I worked in. I'm getting ahead of myself, but just know that anytime I say Sergeant Jones, nothing good was ever going to come from it. And I actually knew Jones from years ago. Way back in the day, when I was still in high school, I worked at the Pizza Hut in Beaumont. He was a driver there. Now, I remember when I first got assigned there, when I did my training in Ad Seg, working in the property room, he was making rounds by and come by. Hey, man, you look familiar to me. Did you ever work at Pizza Hut in Beaumont? I said, "Jones, you were the driver there." And in my mind, I'm going, "Would you put on about 300 pounds or so from then to that?" Because, I mean, quite a few years had gone by. We're talking 1996, and now it's 2013. I get it. A lot can change, but I still kind of look like I do back then. This guy swallowed a couple horses and cows. So I was excited when I saw the guy. Hey, man, somebody I knew from back in the day. Awesome, cool. I didn't remember a whole lot from him because a lot of time had gone from then, but just seeing somebody you know in a new industry, all right. I quickly learned working with him, no. So we ended up getting the offender out of the day room eventually. Jones is able to talk him out, get him in the cell, and go back around, get all the other offenders out of the day rooms, get them in their cells, move on to the next one. By this point, Jones is called over on the radio 3 times trying to get somebody in there to relieve him. He's got supervisory duties that he's got to do. I think it was Campbell, Officer Campbell, that came in to work with me. And Campbell had respect from inmates. All right, as much as you could get from the guys, he had that respect. The day started getting better as soon as he walked in and Jones left the building. We were able to speed up our movements, get guys out of the cells, get them in the day rooms, get them out quicker. I started learning a lot more from him. Now, when you were done with an inmate, when you put them back in the cell, you had to take their piece of paper, write down the time. I quickly learned, stop wearing a watch on my wrist. It bothered the long sleeve shirt. I would wear it down on my belt loop. And I could just kind of glance down at it. No cell phones. I could just kind of glance down at it, write down the time that we had put the offender in, start a 2-hour timer from there. At some point, the chow cart came in. We had to pass out trays. Pill nurse came in midway through that. I keep passing out trays. Campbell takes over the pill nurse, walks her around. We get through the day. It was a full 12-hour shift. This is the first time outside of the 4 trainings that I had done with the different shifts that you work a full 12-hour shift. OJT, you're only on for 8 hours. It's not that bad. 12-hour shift, feet are tired. You're just covered in sweat. Not so much because it's so hot in there, because segregation was air conditioned, but just the stress of it. Just that, the body's reaction, all the stress, and just mentally drained. And I remember walking out, leaving, going, God, it can't be like this every day. Day 2, not a whole lot different than day 1. I realized I had a long way to go. Dig in. This is probably going to be a tough one. Folks, if you guys have made it to this point, you're a trooper. I got a little bit rambly going on there. Started having some memories from individuals. Wanted to kind of go off on some in frustration. Trying to keep it professional. Trying to keep it light. Trying to keep it entertaining. Some videos I'm probably not going to be able to. I might have to watch some of the ones that I do, as I'm having a lot of memory returns from some of these. Thanks for checking out the content. I really hope this was entertaining for you. I hope that the individuals moving into this industry, I hope it's different for you than it was for me. Individuals that are in this industry, that are watching what I'm watching what I'm putting out, I'm sorry. Say whatever you want about it. These are my opinions, and they are the absolute truth and fact as I remember them taking place at my time there. Folks, thanks for checking out the content. I appreciate every single one of you. If you liked what you saw, let me know. If you didn't like it, let me know what you didn't like. I look forward to seeing everybody in the next video. Y'all take care of yourselves. Stay safe.